And it led me to finding out about bacteria and fungi and bacteria that are in our body correlated to the soil. Everything was together. The same bacteria that we had in our body were bacteria in our soil. So I started doing my research. Then Facebook popped up an ad, microbial solutions. So not even knowing they were here local, I reached out and started talking with Frank Cordy, and I learned about the product, and I immediately was very interested and started incorporating it into my program. And where I am now is I use it 100% with everything. I've reduced all of my fertilizer inputs. I'll scare some of you and say that I don't use any dry P&K right now. I don't use any manure or anything like that, but I use biology. I use biological stimulants throughout the whole growing season so that I can use that biology to produce the nutrients that are already in my soil to get it into the plant. One of the things that when I first got into it, I learned that every corn crop needs 400 pounds of nitrogen. Well, I was going out and putting 200, 220 pounds. Where was this other 180, 200 pounds of nitrogen coming from? It comes from the biology. It comes from their activity in the soil. When they are working and they're taking that nitrogen, they are making it into nitrite, nitrate, which is the plant available, and giving it to that plant. So whenever you figure out that all those workers and all those nutrients are in the soil, you can cut back on your inputs and still have sustainable crops. You can maintain the same yields you had, and I have my crop insurance agent here. You can increase your yield in other places. The places I have increased my yields were in my porous ground. And once you find out about the biology, well, the biology was less in those areas, it was less active. So when I added back biology to it, I stimulated it, I was able to bring those yields up and make those fields worth farming. I have a lot of guys that want to use the products. They think it's a silver bullet, so we talk about how good it is. They have their best ground. They go out there and put it on there, and they don't see the response that they're expecting. So I have to put this analogy like a cell phone. All of us use a cell phone every day. It goes down in a certain percentage. Some of us may need 30%, some of us may need a 70% charge. Put it on the charger. The next day, what do we have? We're at 100%. But the thing is this, those that are at 30% need a 30% charge, only needed that 30%. But if you needed 70, you got that whole 70 and you saw a bigger change. So when you need more nutrients and more biological activity in your lower producing ground, that is where you're going to see the biggest change in your increase in yields. So that's what I'm doing right now, is helping farmers use different products like the TM90, the Humic, the NL Ag with microbial solutions, along with other companies to find what fits their program and what they need, because everybody has something different. And different products will work differently. Everybody has different nutrients that are available. Everybody has different biologicals that are in their soil. There's soil tests that we can do to find out what's needed most. What I really love about microbial solutions, of all the biological companies that I've dealt with out there, is they're one of very few that offer mycorrhiza fungi in a liquid solution. And fungi is one of our detrimental pieces, missing links in the soil. Work in the soil, anything we do to disturb the soil, you're breaking up the hyphae, the fungal highways that the bacteria uses to transport all those nutrients. So I'm able to put this product back in there and start building those, because the miners of a lot of these nutrients to bring them up for the bacteria to produce into nutrient available is our fungi. There are miners in the soil to get those nutrients brought up to be available for the biology to be able to work on. So I could really go down a lot of different avenues here. I'd like to take a moment to see if anybody has any questions on what I've said right now. I see a couple farmers over here. So, yes, Dan,
Jason, now, let's say I've got a farm and I want you to come out and check my soil.
Mhm.
You told me earlier that you're not a big believer in, if I understood you correctly, grid sampling, but what would be the first step when your boots hit the ground on my 160 acres?
the first thing we check. So I would want to do a PFLA test, which actually tests your biology in your soil. I'm not discouraging the soil sampling and the grid sampling because they are a good base to find out exactly what kind of nutrients are there. I want you to do it at the right time. That was my biggest thing with you was the timing of your soil test. The reason why the timing of the soil test is so crucial is the biology is active, and when it's making nutrients available, it's gonna be different in a dormant stage in the winter when the ground is cold and they're not as active and you don't have any cover crops going. If you have no cover crops going, there's no live biology in the soil. So if you take that soil sample when the biology is not producing anything, every single time it's gonna show you need NPK. You need everything. It's gonna show that everything is not available. Now, if you take that sampling and you go during your growing season when it's warm, the ground's going, and it's actually, you've got living plants above, and the biology's working in the soil, that's when you want to take your soil samples during your growing season, because that's giving you more of a realistic of what you have available when that crop's growing. You're not growing corn and soybeans in December. Why do you want a soil sample then? Soil sample when your crop is growing so that you know what's happening and what's active at that time. If there are certain nutrients and certain biology that is not active at that time, we have amendments to get them charged up and going. We have biology that we can add out there with trace minerals, humic, to get them active and going to get nutrients available within the next 7 to 10 days.
Is most of your product liquid at this time?
Everything's liquid. So really the guys that have their own sprayers, those are the guys that are really, that I have to focus on, because a lot of the co-ops and things, if they don't sell the product, they don't want to put in their sprayer. Understandably.
Now, when you do your test, do you have a chip that you can put in the sprayer as to the areas that need it, like the dry fertilizer guys use?
I have not came across anybody that has that technology as of yet of how we can do that. That is a great idea to give to some people that, to have a program like that in order to basically prescription apply products. That's what you're talking about?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's not available at this time.
Now, I suspect we have some gardeners in here with the ladies, maybe the guys too.
Mm-hmm.
Flowers.
Yep.
Now, what product do you have, or does Frank have, to energize those flowers better?
The NLAG, the TM90, and the humic acid. And you need to have all of those three things. The biology, then you have the humic, which is a food source, and then you have nutrients. So you basically have a complete package. So when you add that humic with the TM90, that humic's gonna encapsulate all those nutrients. And when it encapsulates all those nutrients and you add that biology, when you put it in there, the biology is going to attack the carbon, the humic acid, and it's going to start breaking that down. Once it gets through that, it has food and energy, it's going to keep going, it's going to eat those nutrients, it's going to poop it out, there's going to be a life cycle that goes on, and then it's going to be uptake into the plants.
So it's a lot better than Miracle-Gro.
I'd put it up against it.
Now, do you sell that in gallon containers?
It is available in smaller forms, yes it is.
And would you mix it together in a garden sprayer, and that's how you would apply it?
Absolutely. That would be, you can mix it up in cups, you can mix it up however. Now, what I will say is, mix it and use it. If you mix it and leave it set, you're probably gonna have a science project going on. But you would not want to pre-mix anything and just let it sit there. If you do, I'd put it in a dark, cool place, so you have a better chance of it not doing something funky.
Now, what about trees?
Mm-hmm.
Your evergreens and things, would that be?
Absolutely. It'll help anything that is a plant and growing, anything with life. If it has respiration, photosynthesizes, it'll help it. Yep, in trees, you can do it around the drip line. That's where you want to do it, and basically the drip line is where the leaves are. You go in and drill holes and put applications in that way. Which we're working with Hickory Ridge Orchard out here. Work with them, Bean Creek cattle. I work with the Amish. There's a few guys around here that we deal with.
So where do we go to get gallons of this stuff?
You can talk to me or you can talk to Frank Cordy, either one. I definitely encourage it. There's a lot of other things, even this bacteria can even help some of the restaurants around here. Grease traps and things like that, they can be applying this into their drains. And if they have a storage container, grease storage, it will actually help keep the smell down and break all that stuff down. So it's not just for farmers and gardeners, there's other uses for this biology. Now you wouldn't want to dump humic acid and TM90 down the drains, but the biology side of it could help in other ways.
Same would be with lagoons?
Absolutely.
Septic tanks?
Well, there's a great story. My parents built a house here in town. It's an underground leach system. When they first put it in, I think maybe Red X or something else was something they were supposed to be putting in 3 months or every 6 months. I don't know what it's supposed to be. Dad was doing that. He would pull the filters out. He would have to power wash it off. It was even building up so bad at one time that he was breaking the little fins out of the filters, so he made wider gaps so he wouldn't get clogged up as much. After I met Frank and learned about the biology, we poured it in their system, and we still do it today. And I don't know how many years it's been now. 5 years? 5 years, and a garden hose has never touched the filter. It's never been plugged. You can pull it out and it looks like day one. Just from using it. And that's 2 applications a year. We do it at Easter and we do it around Thanksgiving. Because those are the 2 times that we had the meals over there. It's about every 6 months. It's a win-win. Well, that's when there's a little bit more activity in the flow, so that's a good time to break it down. You had a question back there, maybe, or did we get it answered?
Oh, I'm just thinking.
Okay.
Now, you do something with fish emollients or
It's
whatever you call it.
It's a fermented fish. It's not a hydrolysate. It's not an emulsion. And I'm actually doing a test right now with Melanie and with a couple of calves. So what we're doing there, I use it on all the crops because it is a huge, when you put it with the biology that Frank has, it makes it go absolutely bizarre. So I know what it's doing. That's why I apply it so much, is to stimulate the biology. It's like stimulating my livestock in the ground. So that led me into wanting to see what it would do for livestock. So Melanie Guy was able to get a couple calves here at the end of January. One was born at 40 pounds. 3 days later, another one was born at 37 pounds. On February 1st, she started taking the high energy fish and incorporating it into the bottle and doing a 1 drop in the morning with the bottle, 1 drop in the evening bottle. We're now 28 days. And she has got a picture of it, and she'll probably share it with you, but there is a noticeable difference in the animal. The one that was born 3 days later and born smaller is now significant, well, not significant, but it is noticeably larger. It has had no scours, and you can tell by the coat how shiny it is. It's a night and day picture, and that's only in 28 days of just adding to a bottle. There's a lot of other tests that we like to do, but this is the first one we've been doing with it, so we hope. There's a lot of other ways that we can incorporate the fish, through feed, through water, through the bottles, because I think there's gonna be a lot of opportunities to incorporate it with other herds into the rations whenever there's feed, but we're having to figure that out.
So if you mix it with water, how long, is there a time frame of when it needs to be consumed?
I'm gonna say yes, because water and oil separates, and there's a lot of oils in here.
When you say 1 drop, you're just talking about a dropper drop?
A dropper drop. So basically, whenever Melanie's taking,
I have a bottle like this with my fish, and I literally just do 1 drop in each bottle, or in JD's bottle, morning and night.
So we know how, what is it? 20 drops in a milliliter. So she keeps track of all this, we'll know, you know, this thing had 1 milliliter in a week. That's not very much, and I can tell you right now, it's really, really cheap. Especially for what it's doing. And from what I understand too, the one that's on that program is also eating better. That's in turn making it a healthier animal and larger.
Tell me more about this fish and stuff that you.
There's not too much more to say. It
I mean, there's
stinks.
other stuff in it.
So what it is,
like,
it's different
like
from a
you
lot
know,
of other
if you
fish,
fish
if
oil
other guys
pills,
have messed with it.
So.
Other fishes out
the
there
weight
are
thing,
either a
but this is
hydrolysate or an
like
emulsion. A hydrolysate
higher.
is through a process of freezing.
Yeah.
They also add
There's
other
other
acids
stuff in
and
it.
other things to break it down fast. Emulsions are with heat, the same thing. They heat it up, add stuff to it. Whenever you do anything real cold or real hot, you lose a lot of enzymes and other goodies in that product. So this is one species, and it's Atlantic salmon. It's a red meat. Red meats are higher in oils. We even know that a salmon is one of the best foods that we can eat for ourselves. And they do the whole fish and they ferment it for no less than 18 months. So this isn't even something that they can say, hey, we need a toad of it, and they can get 2 in a week. It ain't happening. If you say you need a toad of it, we can have 2 in a year and a half, so to speak. So that's what makes it different than everything else, is that with it going through a natural process of breakdown, that it has more bacteria, it has enzymes, it has 71% volatile fatty acids, it has high in proteins and very high in amino acids.
And the shelf life of that, when you buy it in a tote?
The shelf life of it would be years. And that's what I also like about the biology with microbial solutions, is the way that it is colonized, that it has a very extensive shelf life, along with my applications in farm. I'm able to mix it with other products, whereas other bacterias, they are forming smaller colonies, or I should say, not as diverse, where they're getting like 4 to 12 species. They'll create these and ferment them and make them, and you have about 6 months to use them. And if you don't use them, they're done. Yes, ma'am.
So does it have a smell to it?
What's that? The biology? Oh, the fish is horrible. Imagine a diarrhea diaper, and vomit about 12 days in the sun. It is.
Now, does any of that get put on the field scale?
I have used it for 3 years, and I put it on gallons at a time.
So how does it, can you smell it then from the field as well?
If you walk out in it, you have about 48 hours, and you won't be able to smell it at all. Yeah. And I usually try to spray at night, so that my neighbors don't have to smell it.
That was what I was wondering.
Yeah.
And it all goes on the surface, it's not incorporated at all?
I have put it in furrow in my liquid system and had terrific results. And it's comboed with the biology. It's a package deal. It's not just, there's no one thing, there's no silver bullet. You find it's a combination of multiple things to put together. I mean, everybody can pick out, say, well, I want to use that, I want to use that. You can use that, but don't expect large returns, because you need other things like the biology. It needs things to stimulate it to make it better. So when I've talked to people, I've talked to them about TN90, humic, and biology. Well, they just want to take the biology and run with it. And I'll sell it to them. I mean, they want to use it, that's what they want to buy, but they're not going to get the benefit as if they would have used all 3. Because it's a package system.
You apply all 3 at the same time?
Absolutely, you cannot encourage it.
Can you come in and do like Roundup too in the same pass?
Yes,
or
sir.
You can mix it that way?
And actually having the humic in there will actually make your Roundup go into the plant better and work better. So you're actually going to increase your availability of the Roundup working better by incorporating humic with it. But also with Roundup, you need to also, I have found a organic way to drop the pH with a carbon, because Roundup will work better at a 3.5 to 4.0 pH tank mix, and most of everything we're mixing is at a 7. So that's a lot of the reasons why the Roundup's not working as well, as we're not paying attention to what it actually is supposed to be working at. So when we mix our tanks and not condition them, and get a carbon in there to get a lot of the impurities out of it. That once we get that carbon in there, attach the impurities out, then it doesn't attach to the chemical and allows it to work better.
Can you put too much of this stuff on?
Yeah, absolutely. You can be a moron and put more on.
So on my yard, it would really help, except for the fish smell all around the neighborhood, right?
Yep. Again, you'd have about 48 hours of walking around in your yard, and then it would be gone, because the bacteria would actually consume and get it off of the surface, and it would be gone in that time.
Now, would 1 gallon of each of the 3 elements in a yard sprayer, that would not be too much to put on, would it?
Not on a yard. I would not do that for a garden or flowers or for smaller areas. If you're going over a large area, you could do that. If you're doing flowers and such, I'd cut back on the biology. I'd stay heavy on the humic acid, and I would watch what you do with the TM90 with the trace elements. If it's with the humic, it's not going to burn the plant because it does have a salt content to it. The TM90 does, but the humic will help cut that. Anytime you use a carbon with anything with a salt, it will help cut the burn off of it. And I'll explain why that happens. So like nitrogen, when people go out and apply nitrogen on plants and they do it in a liquid form, it's a high salt. So when it hits that leaf, the bacteria go to attack it, it's a salt, and they're like, nope, don't want no part of it. Or it's too large, they don't want to attack it because it's too big. It'll be detrimental to them. It may not kill them, but it may kill some, but they don't want to attack it immediately. If you put a carbon with it and encapsulate that salt, then when it goes out on the leaf, the biology goes out and attacks it because it's carbon, they pull it off there, and they start breaking it down and get it off the leaf surface, and you have no burning on the plant.
This is complicated.
It is,
Does it come with instructions when we buy it from you?
that's what my phone's for.
Do you have any publications as far as all the data that you're explaining?
No.
It's all up here, Gary.
Yeah.
He can, I mean, some of the numbers he can rattle off, it's just.
I mean, like research to validate these concepts, and I'm following part of it,
So a lot of the things that I have talked about today is I've got from different resources. So I could give you resource information to reach out to people that are professional to say that I know this for sure and I do have the research on it. Because I'm working with an agronomist out in Indiana that he knows soil biology, and he knows nutrients, and he knows plant health. And it's very, 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 very far and few you find an agronomist that knows anything beyond NPK.
let's just talk about like the pH. And I'm ancient agronomy major, but I'm just saying the soil chemistry on the inorganic side. So how you integrate like your organic world with a traditional line, for instance, okay, which frees up exchange of nutrients to the plant.
If you need,
Simply with a pH adjustment.
yeah, if you're gonna
So
adjust
how do you
pH in
integrate
soil,
with inorganic or conventional methods, like liming, for instance, to adjust, that availability of the nutrients. Clay particle size affects nutrients, so availability. So how do you are you integrating any of these biological concepts with the inorganic side?
I am inorganic. I'm not an organic farmer at all.
Okay, I was just calling this my limited.
Okay.
here
Yeah.
Of the nutrients.
Okay.
Of organisms per se.
Well, if you have a low pH and you are low in calcium, you are gonna need to add lime
Right.
to raise the pH and get calcium built up.
Right.
Okay? Once you get your system into a balance with the biology and the nutrients and everything, and with plants growing, it's all gonna work. But you have to get biology out there and active in order to get that balance started. There's probably no way I'll ever get it all in balance. That's gonna be nearly impossible. Only God did that, and I'm not God. I am trying to mimic the things that he's given us to try to put a system together to help balance it out better. But I'm not gonna be able to do it with liquids, I'm not gonna be able to do it with biology, but I'll be able to do it with the system by making sure that I have cover crops growing, so that I have a living plant, so that I have living soil year round. And it's not gonna be perfect, I'm not perfect with it, I'm still learning. We use a Dimeki seed, here locally, those guys, they're understanding too that it's not just, rye that we use for a cover crop, we need a diverse cover crop. So that way, because all these cover crops produce different nutrients to put back into the soil. So if we just focus on one cover crop, and we just focus on what that puts back in the soil, then we're not balancing out everything else. So even when I talk about diversity in biology, we talk about diversity in our cover crops too, so that we can put those nutrients back in there. Additionally, we pay attention to the weeds that are growing out there. You know, water hemp, we're like, why do we have so much of it? Well, if you dig up a water hemp plant and look at the fungal growth that's around that root system, it tells you, just like I said earlier, we're lacking in fungi in the soil. Well, that's what they're trying to do, is they're trying to grow and get fungal growth back in the soil. So until you start addressing and fixing that, water hemp's gonna be around here for a while. Dandelions. If you have dandelions, you're lacking in calcium. It gives you a sign. It's a weed that's growing that tells you what you're lacking. Even more complicated, huh, Dan?
Okay. What's that pretty purple flower?
Henbit.
Yeah, we didn't used to have henbit around.
And I used to know what that deficiency was, and I need to text a lady in Canada, but there is a deficiency in a micronutrient that causes that. And I'm thinking it's either iron or sulfur. I think is one of the two. But I don't want you to quote me on that right now.
So what I hear you telling me I'm doing wrong is, one, taking soil samples in the fall and relying on those.
And especially taking it in the fall when you've just produced a crop and that crop's taking all that nutrient up. And there's been no activity for replenishing those nutrients. So every single time it's gonna tell you need something.
Number two, not having a crop on the ground all year long, crop or cover crop,
A living plant,
a living plant, all year
a
long.
green leaf above the ground.
Okay. And third is not using no-till all the time.
That is very helpful. I am actually minimal till, because we did no-till for so long and so wrong that I'm trying to correct it. I've got huge compaction issues, so now I'm using an inline ripper in order to make air passageways, because we need oxygen in the ground. We need it for bacteria, and we need it for fungi, we need it for biology. The aerobic bacteria are the good guys, the anaerobic are the bad guys, and I have a lot of anaerobic out there. That's why I use aerobic bacteria and aerobic stimulators to get those guys working. So you have to do what's right. That's why every farmer I talk to is different, because they all have to do different things to get to a good system that works for them. You know, just because what I do on my farm doesn't work for Charlie, or work for Dawn, or work for you, but there's things that you do that we can incorporate this into your system to make it better. We can either incorporate and add to, or we can replace. That's all a discussion, and it all has to be to what the farmer is willing to do. Because reducing fertilizer or not tilling the ground is scary. That's change.
So talk about the cost difference between like your nitrogen and fertilizers versus your micronutrients.
So
Just a generic-
that's good. So when I first started raising corn, I was putting out anywhere from 200 to 240 pounds of anhydrous, and maybe make 180 bushel corn, 170, 180, somewhere around there, maybe. Then I found out that CECs made it, so going back to your soil test, that's where this comes in handy, is knowing the CEC. That's not gonna change. You can do that fall, spring, whenever, CECs. I was having anywhere from 11 to 15 CEC soils, so I was never gonna hold 220 pounds. I was gonna hold 150 pounds of nitrogen. So I have started decreasing that. Well, then I've got nitrosomonas bacteria that is a nitrogen fixing bacteria, so I start putting that out there so that it transforms that anhydrous, that nitrogen, into a nitrite or nitrate. Then I stimulate it with the fish, which is amino acids. It's also a smaller form. So now I'm down to 140 pounds of anhydrous. That's the only synthetic fertilizer I use, and I'm 196 bushel average on 300 acres of corn. So by reducing my fertilizer input down to 140 and saving money, using the biology and the amino acids in the fish, I've gained
So
60
there's
pounds.
Side dress?
No side dress, no top dress, no wide drops, no nothing. Amino acids are a smaller or more readily available form of nitrogen than what nitrite and nitrate are. And kind of like deer will go through the path of least resistance, right? Biology, bacteria is the same way. If it's in a simple form, boom, they're gonna go to that first and they're gonna process it. When it's in that form, it is actually 6 to 10 times more available and more nutrient to the plant than what actual nitrogen form is. An anhydrous at 32%, a 28%, whatever it is, 4600 dry, whatever that is, it's a more available nutrient in a nitrogen form as amino. And so that's where it's really big key there as well, using it. And having the biology to break it down.
A lot of farmers now are going to top dressing wheat and maybe even top dressing corn.
Mm-hmm.
Is your program necessary for that, or is that completely different?
No, there's they're top dressing with nitrogen. We can add stabilizers and biology to that way they have more of that available, and we can add a biological to it so that they have a nitrogen fixing within the plant so that they can get more nitrogen available out of that top dress.
We have time for maybe one quick question. Maybe one more quick question.
Question, you said you've decreased the amount of anhydrous you're putting on, and you've put on these soil amendments to that, the different biologicals. What is the cost of those biologicals that you're using now versus what the added fertilizer would be?
So like the fish is $15 a gallon. So I would put three gallons on it, so that's $45 a day. That's pretty cheap nitrogen, especially for 60 pounds. And I probably, and people that are using fertilizer currently now, so if you've already put on dry fertilizer, you can cut back to a 32 ounce. You can spend $4, $5, $6, incorporate it with what you've already got going, and see how it works, and see how much more you get out of that. Then you know you can start backing down here, and then increasing it,